I'm Minna Fairchild. Last night, while I was cleaning before my mother's birthday, I froze on the stairs. I heard my sister whisper, "Can't wait for Minna to leave." My mother laughed softly and agreed. I closed the door quietly, smiled like it didn't matter. While inside, something in me shattered for good. The night before my mother's birthday, the house was quiet except for the creak of the stairs beneath my feet. I paused halfway down, cloth still in my hand, when a hushed voice slipped through the air. Leah's tone was sharp, playful, and cruel all at once. "Can't wait for Minna to leave." A small laugh followed, light and mean, like glass cracking in the dark. Then my mother's voice, steady, almost amused, answered, "Everything will be easier once she's gone." For a moment, I couldn't move. The air thickened around me, pressing against my chest until it hurt to breathe. Their words cut deeper than anything I'd ever been told outright. I stood there in silence, the stair rail digging into my palm as if to anchor me. Every syllable felt like a blade, each one reminding me I was nothing more than a burden in the very place I had poured myself into. I forced the muscles in my face into something that resembled a smile, though no one could see me. Closing the door softly, I let the latch click shut, like sealing off a secret. My lips curved upward, but inside, a fissure opened that I knew would never truly heal. The laughter downstairs drifted on, casual and cruel, while I stood in the hallway above with my heart in pieces. They wanted me gone, and for the first time, I thought, maybe they would finally get what they wished for. 4 years earlier, the city glowed like a promise outside my window. My inbox held the offer letter from a prestigious financial firm, and everything in me buzzed with the certainty that the life I had worked for was finally about to begin. Then the phone rang. My mother's voice came through, cracked and wet with tears. Between halting breaths, she told me my father had collapsed. The doctors said his heart was weak, and the family's building supply store in Portland was sliding toward bankruptcy. "Come home, just for a little while. We need you." I remember standing frozen in my tiny apartment, suitcase open on the bed, shirts half folded. The glow of Manhattan through the window suddenly felt like a world I wasn't allowed to enter. All night I argued with myself, pacing the same few feet of floor, staring at the offer letter as though it might fight for me. By dawn, I had made the call. I zipped the suitcase, turned off the lights, and walked away from the life I had built, telling myself it was only temporary, just a few months to help them. Yet, even as I locked the door behind me, a hollow ache opened in my chest, a quiet knowledge that I was handing over more than my time. That return saved the store, but it also built invisible walls around my own future. Back in Portland, the first paycheck disappeared before I could even catch my breath. Mortgage, utilities, store expenses, Leah's tuition. By the second month, I was living on instant noodles and coffee, rotating the same worn blouses while my sister came home, flashing her new shoes, the latest iPhone, brochures for a short study program abroad. I tried to believe it was all worth it, that my sacrifices were an investment in our family's survival. Then, at a family gathering, an aunt tilted her head and said brightly, "We heard you couldn't make it in New York and had to come back." My stomach lurched. Across the table, my mother smiled, silent, letting the lie bloom in the air. In that instant, I saw the story they had built for everyone else. I wasn't the one holding everything up. I was the failure they were graciously taking in. By 24, my days blurred into the same routine. Early mornings at the office, late nights at the family store, and falling asleep in the childhood room I'd never escaped. My wallet was always thin, my savings account a joke. Downstairs, Leah breezed in from the airport clutching a Prada bag, sliding a new iPhone across the counter, showing off glossy photos from a short study program in Italy. "Where did the money come from?" I asked as evenly as I could. She glanced at me, shrugged, and buried her face in her phone. Our mother started talking about dinner plans. My father, suddenly fascinated by the TV, didn't say a word. A few days later, standing at the bank to make another mortgage payment, I noticed the numbers didn't line up. The amount I deposited wasn't what had been credited. Back home, I tore through the household ledger, line by line, until a pattern emerged, large sums diverted to supplemental educational needs under Leah's name. The realization hit like a cold wave. The money I was pouring into the mortgage wasn't even keeping the roof over our heads. It was feeding handbags, phones, and Italian postcards. My hands shook over the papers, a mix of fury and betrayal crawling up my spine, and yet some corner of me knew this was only the beginning. That night at dinner, I put down my fork and asked, "I'm covering every bill? Where's the rest of the money going?" My mother's eyes hardened. "You're being selfish. Leah has to fit in. You'd let your sister look like a charity case?" Leah snapped. "You're cheap. You don't get what college is like." My father stayed silent, staring at his plate, as if the gravy there could save him, cornered. My mother dropped her final blow. "This house will go to Leah. You're different. You can take care of yourself." The words struck harder than any slap. 4 years of sacrifice, and the one future I had clung to was already promised away. In that moment, I understood I wasn't a daughter in their eyes. I was only the bottomless wallet keeping their world afloat. Dinner that night felt almost staged, as if Leah had been waiting for her cue. She stabbed a piece of chicken, leaned back with a satisfied grin, and announced, "Spring break, Miami, flights, hotel, food, all in, $800. Then she tilted her head toward me, the expectation shameless in her eyes. "You'll cover it, right?" The table fell silent, everyone watching me. I set my fork down carefully, not because I was calm, but because my hands were trembling. "No." The smile evaporated from her face. "What do you mean, no?" "I'm not paying for that trip," I said flatly. Leah's chair screeched against the floor as she jerked back. "You're unbelievable." My mother's voice cut through next, sharp and indignant. "Minna, don't be so heartless. She's young. She should be enjoying herself. Do you want her to miss out while everyone else is living their lives?" I opened my mouth, but my father, usually the quiet one, interrupted. His voice was low but firm, like a verdict being delivered. "We can't risk losing the house. You have to understand, Minna." It wasn't about the house. It was about me being expected to fund every whim, no matter how ridiculous. In that moment, I realized the 3 people sitting across from me weren't family anymore. They were collectors, circling my paycheck like vultures. The food on my plate turned to dust in my mouth. I excused myself, but the echo of their disappointment followed me up the stairs, wrapping around me tighter than any debt. That night, lying awake, I kept hearing their voices. Each word pressed deeper until I could no longer ignore the truth. To them, I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was the wallet keeping their dreams afloat. The house was quiet except for the rustle of papers in my room. I was sorting receipts when laughter floated up from the kitchen, soft, conspiratorial. My heart stuttered. I crept to the landing, pressing myself into the shadow of the banister. "She'll be out as soon as the 90,000's paid off," Leah whispered, excitement dripping from every syllable. "Her room will make the perfect walk-in closet." My mother chuckled, indulgent and warm in a way she hadn't been with me in years. "Yes, darling. This house is yours. She can fend for herself." The words carved into me like a knife. Not only had they drained me dry, they were planning to erase me altogether. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, reduced to a countdown until I was discarded. I gripped the rail until my knuckles burned. Betrayal roared in my ears, hot and suffocating. Yet beneath the fury, something colder and sharper took root. If they thought I would fade quietly, they were wrong. I backed away from the stairs, forcing my breath to steady. Their laughter carried on below, oblivious to the storm gathering just above them. A plan was already forming, clear as glass, born from the fire of their betrayal. They wanted me gone. I would go, but not before the world knew exactly what they had done. I began siphoning pieces of my paycheck into an account they didn't know existed. A few $100s here, a few there, small enough not to raise questions. Each transfer felt like smuggling scraps of freedom past a guard tower. By the end of 3 months, I had enough to put down a deposit on a studio in Seattle. Tiny, tucked a few blocks from the Space Needle, with peeling paint and a view of nothing but an alley. But when I signed the lease, it felt like I had finally placed 1 foot outside the prison they built around me. At night, I knelt beside my bed and slid a suitcase out from underneath. I filled it slowly. A few work clothes, the sweater I loved since college, a framed photo of me with friends from New York. Nothing that would be missed if someone decided to snoop, but enough to remind me that my life was still mine. I pushed it back under the bed, hidden but ready, like a lifeboat under canvas. Even as I prepared to leave, anger churned with every quiet breath. I could have walked away silently, slipped out like smoke, let them wake to find my room empty. But their laughter on that night, their joy at planning my absence, kept playing in my head. They hadn't just drained me. They had mocked me. They had erased me before I was even gone. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they had done, not in a scream, not in another argument at the dinner table they would twist against me. I wanted witnesses. I wanted every aunt and uncle, every family friend who thought they knew the truth, to hear exactly what I had endured. My mother's birthday was days away. Relatives would gather, people who believed I had failed in New York and returned to Leech off the kindness of my parents. I could already imagine the polite smiles, the pitying glances, the stories whispered once my back was turned. That night, the masks would come off. I rehearsed in silence, over and over. I pictured myself handing her an envelope, sleek, heavy, the kind that promised something valuable. She'd open it, expecting money, a gift card, some token of gratitude, and inside, there would be nothing, empty, just like the love I had poured into this family. Every detail fell into place. The savings account, the lease, the suitcase, the plan for the party. I lived 2 lives, one still bound to the house, the other already halfway out the door. The double weight pressed on me until I thought I'd suffocate, but under that weight was steel, hardening every day. I wasn't leaving in silence. They wanted me gone, and they would get their wish, but not before I made sure they understood exactly what they had lost. The house was glowing that evening, strung with lights and full of chatter, the smell of roast and cake heavy in the air. Relatives had traveled from across town. Friends from church crowded into the living room, and everywhere I turned there were smiles. Smiles polished with pity. They had all been fed the same story. I could see it in their eyes. To them, I was the child who couldn't cut it in New York, who had come crawling back to live under her parents' roof, surviving off their goodwill. I carried plates, poured drinks, made small talk. My mother glided through the room, glowing in her new dress, receiving kisses and congratulations. Leah hovered nearby, laughing with cousins, tossing her hair, her diamond earrings flashing under the chandelier. I watched it all with the calm of someone who had rehearsed her next move 100 times. When it came time for gifts, the mood turned expectant, one by one. Packages and envelopes piled into my mother's lap. Perfume, a silk scarf, an ornate dish set, a card stuffed with cash. She beamed, thanking each person, the room swelling with warmth. Then my turn came. I stepped forward with an envelope of thick ivory paper, sealed with a gold sticker. It looked important, expensive, the kind of gift everyone assumed would carry weight. Her fingers slid it open delicately. The room hushed to watch. She pulled the flap back, peeked inside, and froze. Her smile faltered, confusion flickering across her face. The envelope was empty. Murmurs rippled through the room. She blinked, looked at me. "Where's the gift?" I met her gaze and let a small smile spread. That is the gift. Exactly what this family deserves from me. Nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. A fork clattered to the floor, somewhere in the back, but no one bent to pick it up. My mother's face flushed deep red, my father's jaw tightened, and Leah's eyes went wide. I straightened my shoulders, my voice cutting through the stillness. For the last 4 years, I have paid every mortgage bill, every utility, every grocery run. I've covered tuition, dorm fees, meal plans. I've kept the store afloat when it was on the verge of collapse. And while I gave everything, I looked directly at my mother, then at Leah. Sat here planning how to throw me out once the last payment was made, planning to turn my room into a closet. Gasps rolled through the crowd. My aunt pressed a hand to her chest. A cousin whispered, "Oh my God!" under her breath. My father lurched to his feet. "That's enough. This is your mother's birthday. How dare you? How dare I?" I cut him off, my voice rising, steady with fury. "How dare you take every dollar I earned, then tell the world I was a failure you had to support? How dare you lie to everyone in this room while draining me dry?" Leah burst out, her voice shrill. "You're making this up! You're crazy!" "Crazy?" I snapped. "Then explain the receipts, the withdrawals marked for supplemental education, the Prada bag, the trips abroad. Explain why the money I put toward the mortgage never added up when I checked the bank. Or better yet," I turned toward the room, "ask them." The crowd shifted, restless. Then, from the corner, my Uncle David, my father's brother, cleared his throat. He stepped forward, his face grave. "I saw her," he said slowly. "I saw Minna at the bank more than once, signing checks, handing over payments. I kept quiet because I thought it was family business. But it's true. She's been carrying you all." The room erupted. Voices overlapped, questions, disbelief, judgment thick in the air. My mother sat stiff, her hands trembling in her lap. My father's face was ashen. Leah stood frozen, her mouth open, cheeks drained of color. I stood in the center of the storm, my chin high, heart pounding not from fear but from release. For the first time in years, I wasn't their silent provider, their scapegoat, their invisible servant. I was the truth they could no longer bury. And in that moment, with every pair of eyes fixed on them instead of me, I felt taller than I ever had under their roof. I left that night without another word. The guests were still murmuring in the living room when I slipped upstairs, slid the suitcase from under my bed, and zipped it closed. Every item inside had been chosen carefully, just enough to begin again. Nothing to weigh me down. I carried it past the closed doors, past the muffled voices, and the smell of birthday cake, and out into the cold. The porch light cast a weak glow on the driveway as I loaded the bag into my car. The engine started on the first try. I didn't look back at the house, not at the window where I'd stood listening, not at the walls I had paid for, not at the people who had turned me into a resource to be drained. Headlights cut through the darkness as I drove toward the interstate. When I crossed the Fremont Bridge, the city opened up around me like a page I hadn't dared to turn. The wind from the sound rushed in through my cracked window and hit my face, cool and clean. For the first time in years, my shoulders dropped. The tension I'd carried like armor slid off and into the night. In the weeks that followed, my phone rang constantly. Calls from my parents, texts from Leah, then from cousins urging me to make peace. I didn't answer. One by one, the messages stopped. Word drifted back to me anyway. Without my checks, tuition went unpaid. Leah dropped out of school and took a part-time job at the local store. The mortgage bills piled up. The house I had kept afloat was no longer a guarantee. Meanwhile, I unpacked my few belongings in the small Seattle studio. The walls were bare, the floor scuffed, but the keys were mine. I bought clothes that fit, took weekend trips with friends, opened a savings account in my own name. Each small act felt like a reclamation of time stolen. They had spent years wishing I would disappear. Now they had exactly what they wanted. But as I stood in my tiny kitchen, sunlight spilling across the counter, I realized the truth. I wasn't the one left with nothing. I was finally living. They had lost their meal ticket. I had found my life.